5. Microsoft Excel. What is Excel? Microsoft Excel is a spreadsheet program included in the Microsoft Office suite of applications. Spreadsheets present tables of values arranged in rows and columns that can be manipulated mathematically using both basic and complex arithmetic operations and functions. Now that's quite wordy, but it basically just means that in Excel you can use a whole lot of maths and stuff to work out your numbers, which is great because I'm personally not very good at math, so having Excel do it all for me is fantastic. In addition to its standard spreadsheet features, Excel also offers programming support via Microsoft Visual Basic for Applications, or VBA, and the ability to access data from external sources via Microsoft's Dynamic Data Exchange, and extensive graphing and charting capabilities, all of which you will have no use for, but it's interesting to know that it's there. If you were doing Office admin, it's interesting to know what kind of applications or how it would be used in an Office environment. So Microsoft Excel is a spreadsheet program used to store and retrieve numerical data in a grid format of columns and rows. We're going to be learning about columns and rows and how that works in just a moment. Excel is ideal for entering, calculating, and analyzing company data such as sales figures, sales tax, or commissions. Although Word has some graphical and calculation capabilities, Excel offers far more tools for calculating trends, deciphering profits, creating numerical formats, and visual data. The Excel program can turn a spreadsheet of numbers into a pie chart, bar diagram, or a variety of other visual diagrams. Excel can also be used to store text-based data such as client lists, employee data, and mailing lists. It's actually really cool being able to turn information into things like pie charts and bar charts, because as humans, we tend to be very graphically orientated, very visually orientated. So, seeing data represented really simply in like this number of people or this percentage of things is much easier to us than trying to look at a whole list of numbers and working that out. Reports. You can use Excel and Word individually or in combination to create company reports. Word is ideal for presenting reports in written form by summarizing and formatting data using a table of contents, headings, font changes, and pagination. Excel can be used to create the supporting data for a written report, which might include selecting a particular range of data by date, department, or personnel. So if you have a Word document that already has a whole lot of information about something in there, you could copy a completed pie chart or bar graph out of Excel and put that into your Word document. So for example, monthly sales reports can be created according to customer, manufacturer, salesperson, or product using Excel's data sorting and selection capabilities, which is based on previously defined data by attributes such as department name, manufacturer, or acquisition date. Examples of company reports might include financial summaries, compliance documents, or personnel reports outlining vacation and sick days. So not necessarily information you need to know, but it just gives you a bit of a broad idea from Excel is one of those things where there's no upper limit to what you could learn. I could probably teach an 8-week course just on Excel, and then 2 more 8-week courses on Excel, and then you'd have a fair idea what it could actually do. It's a huge program. And when you learn everything there is to know in Excel, then you learn how to combine them together to do other things. I'm still learning Excel. There's so many things to it that's unbelievable. I'd like to compare the other programs to one that we did first, which was Microsoft Word, because there's a lot of similarities between them. So how is it different to Word? Well, Word handles text better. Excel's not really designed for typing up an essay or an assignment or something in Excel. Although I did hear a story about one man who only used Excel, and he would take one single cell, which you'll see in a moment, and make it as big as an A4 page and do all the typing in there. It would be an incredibly difficult way to use it, but the old saying of use what you know. Word is for printing. You can print in Excel, but it's definitely a different experience. If you just go into Excel and print and press print and go, then you're going to end up with wasting a lot of pages. As I said before, you can make nice charts in Excel, and you could actually print off just a chart, or you can also copy that chart into like a Word document and have supporting evidence. Excel performs numerical calculation. They actually did add some very simple calculations into Microsoft Word. I've never actually used them, but some of their tables can do calculations, but Excel is the one that can really take advantage of being able to do math. The Excel file is a table, which is made up of rows and columns, which we'll be looking at in a moment, and Word supports footnotes. There are no footnotes in Excel because Word has the sort of academic background of assignments and writing long papers. You need to have those sort of footnotes and things like that. How is it similar to Word? Both have a similar look and feel. Shortcuts are mostly identical between the two. The ribbon is present and works similarly. There is a spell checker in Excel, but it's not automatic, and that's because, as you'll see when we get into doing functions and formulas, there's often some stuff in there that isn't plain English. So spell checker would have a hard time trying to work that out. Over on page 3 we have some terminology. So we have, the first one is workbook versus worksheet. So the workbook, you can see the arrow up here pointing at the top, and worksheet we have pointing down the bottom here. When you open Excel, a new file is created called Book 1 until you name it differently. It is called Book because it is a workbook and can be made up of many worksheets. Think of a 3-ring binder with 3 sheets of paper in it. As with the binder, you can add to your sheet, add sheets to your workbook via Insert Worksheet, delete them and rearrange them. You can also double click on the name to also change its name from sheet 1 to whatever it is you want to call it. Another good example would be if you had an Excel workbook called My Budget for 2020, then each one of those sheets could be named after each of the months. So you have a budget for January, for February, for March, April, and so on. The next piece of terminology we're going to learn is column. Columns travel vertically and are assigned letters. So you can see here, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Here we have column B, which runs the entire vertical length of the document. So it goes A, B, C, D, all the way up to Z, and then it actually wraps around and keeps going to A, B, A, C, A, D. The numbers go, is the next one, which is, zoom out again, rows. Rows travel horizontally and are numbered. So we have the numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they run across the page. So columns run up and down, rows run across. I usually try to think of columns as those big poles from the old Roman buildings, the Colosseums, have their big columns at the front, and they obviously stand vertically. And you can think of rows like rows of seats. The cells are the basic rectangular building blocks of a spreadsheet. They are assigned an address, generally referred to as a cell reference. If you have this document printed out, you might like to underline cell reference, according to their column and row. E.g., the cell in column B at row 3 is referenced as B3. Let me actually show you that up here. Zoom in again. So column B, row 3 is cell B3, and it even tells you there. You can see this cell is selected because it has a line around it, and when it's selected up here it actually tells you which cell you're in. That saves you having to try and look around and work out where you are, but trying to line it up with your eye, you can look up here and see what cell it is. If you've ever used the Melways before, it actually works on the same principle as that. You say turn to page 15 and I'm in B3, and it helps you to find where the street's located. It's the exact same system. In the Melways you have letters running across the top and you have numbers running down the side. The next piece of terminology is formula, using the 4 basic operators, which we're going to learn a bit more about very soon, and cell references to perform calculations. These are the simplest ones to use in Excel, and it's something usually like one thing plus another thing, and then finding out what that equals. Functions, so formula and functions kind of go together. A function is a pre-written formula that can use cell references, formulas and variables to perform complex calculations. So it can do some more complicated things for you. The formula bar, here you can see the formula of that a cell contains. I thought I fixed that. When it is selected, in the cell you will usually see the result. You can also type and edit your formulas in here. So if I scroll back up to the picture, the formula bar here is sort of outlined in yellow. So that's the formula bar. We'll be switching over into Excel in a moment to have a look how that looks as well. And the final piece of terminology is range. Range is used to select a group of cells. It must have a colon, which is 2 dots, not a semicolon, which is a dot and a comma. So that one's a little tricky. If you look on your keyboard, next to the letter L for Lima, you'll see a button that has both those symbols on it, the colon and the semicolon. To get the colon, you have to actually hold down the Shift key on your keyboard to get it. If you're not pressing Shift, you'll get the semicolon. Very confusing.
colon's double dot, is it?
Colon is the double dot, and semicolon is the dot with the comma. It's also very important to get into the habit of it's always the column then the row. So this cell here is B3, it's not 3B. If you tell Excel 3B, it's going to go, I have no idea what you're talking about. So it's always got to be the letter first.
I think a cell's a Latin word for a single room.
That would make sense. That would make sense in the context. It also kind of looks like prison bars here with the way the grid's set up. Yeah, an individual cell. I'm pretty sure that is. Also like the cells in the human body too. Okay, so before we get to moving around, let's actually open up Excel. I'm going to click on the Windows Start button here down the bottom left, and I'm going to go over to Excel. Now it is here my most used, but I can also scroll down and find it alphabetically Excel. And in this case, I'm using Excel 2016. When Excel loads, much like many of the other Microsoft products, you get all this screen here with a whole lot of different templates that you can use. You can also go through this process once you've done today's class. There's take a tour, getting started with formulas, making your first pivot table, getting more out of pivot tables, and going beyond pie charts, some actual ones that are built into Microsoft Excel that are actually worth going through and doing. I'm going to click on a blank workbook to get started. If you have Excel installed as well, feel free to also open up your own copies. It starts off very, very big, and I don't need this much space to work with. I like to zoom into what I'm working on. Once again, I can hold down the control key on the keyboard and scroll the mouse wheel. Once again, that's my second favorite shortcut after Control Z for undo things. So I use that one so often to zoom in and out and to position things the way that I like them. So for moving around, we can left mouse click on things. So I can left mouse click here, I can left mouse click here, anywhere I like. Once again, up the top left here, probably hard to see on this screen, but it says here B7. So it tells me what cell I'm in. It also highlights the column and the row, so you can sort of go on here, that's I5. So that's one way of moving around. If you right mouse click any of the cells, it's not really moving around, but you do get options to do things in there. For example, copy, cut, paste, insert or delete. A lot of other more advanced things too. So you can right mouse click on a cell. Once again, right mouse click is used to get the options for the thing that you're clicking on. The next two are kind of together. We have enter and tab. I'm going to first click on maybe cell A1 first. And I'm going to type in the word name. Whoops, caps lock is on. Name. When I press enter, it will complete this line and move me down one. So enter is for moving down the page. In Word, when we press enter, we add a new line. So that's the way to remember it, is enter moves you down. If I type in something here, and instead of pressing enter, I press tab instead. So the enter and tab key are kind of grouped together because tab will complete what I'm typing here and move me to the right. There. So these are used for different scenarios when you're using Excel. If you had to type in a whole lot of different headings, and you had to go across the page, you would press tab. Press tab, and it would move you across. If you then have to come in and put information going down, then you would press enter.
How did you get it back?
So I actually can't remember. I think I either clicked there, or one of the other methods is to use the arrow keys up, right, left, down. So you can use the arrow keys to move around. This is good if you don't want to take your hand off the keyboard. If you're doing lots of typing, you can just use the arrow keys to move around your cells. So pressing right will move you right, pressing left will move you left, down will move you down, up will move you up. Or I might have clicked with the mouse. I'm not actually sure which one I did. It's so instinctive to me, I just do it without thinking often. But definitely clicking is the other good way to get around. So when I was here, I could just click, down to here and then type my word there. Another useful one is we have the home key. From any cell that you're in, when you press the home key on your keyboards, that's usually located above your arrow keys, it'll take you to the first cell in the row that you are in. So I'm in row 5 at the moment. If I press the home key, it'll take me to the first cell in there. So if you've got a long, I guess wide lot of data that goes way over, pressing the home key will bring you back to the start again. You can also hold down control and press home, and it will always take you to the first cell in your worksheet. So if you're completely lost and you're like, I've got no idea where I am, I can't see any information, try control home. That's another good one to highlight, because if you end up getting lost, particularly by one of these next ones, it'll help you to find your place again. This next one's interesting. It's kind of the opposite. Control and end will take you to the last cell that has something in it, kind of. As you can see here, it's taking me to a cell that doesn't have anything in it, but it's actually the junction between the column and the row that has something in it. So it takes me to sort of the last probable spot that I would want to be in. Once again, this is very useful if you have a large sheet of data here. The next two can cause a bit of confusion, is the page up and page down. If I press the page down key, these keys are all sort of grouped together here. It looks like I just deleted everything, but all I've done is I've moved down one page. So you look at the numbers over here, 14, 15, 16. I moved down about 14 lines. If I press page up again, it's just there. It's just moved me down about however many is on screen. You'll see at the moment 13 is the one at the bottom there. If I press page down, it moves me down past that point. So you could also use scroll bars. You do have scroll bars on the side of the screen, so you might be able to click up the top of the bar, or right up near the arrow. Might take you back up to the very top.
At the start now.
I mean, there is another one which I don't usually cover. You can actually type a cell number in the box up here. I said up here in the name box. It tells you what cell you're in. If you type LA1 in there, it'll also take you to there. And as I mentioned before, arrow keys is the other way to move around. So up, left, down, right will move you around as well. So if you don't want to take your hand off the keyboard, then that's a good way to move around. The next page in the document's a really interesting one. It's one I've only added just recently. It's the things that your mouse cursor does in Excel, because it's very important to know what your mouse cursor looks like, because it's going to tell you what it's going to be doing. So this is on page 5, I believe. So the first one is the white cross. And I can't really make it any bigger, unfortunately, but if you look at your handout, you should see that the first one is the white cross. This allows you to actually click and drag things and actually select multiple items. So if your cursor is a white cross and you hold down and left click and drag, you'll be able to select multiple things. The next one is it's probably the hardest one to see. It's the black cross. When you have a cell selected, or multiple cells like I have here, then the bottom right hand corner of your selection, you'll have this tiny little black, it's actually green, tiny little green square. And if you put your cursor over it, your cursor will change to a tiny little black cross. Now, if you have a bit of difficulty with your mouse skills and you have trouble with the precision of this one, it takes a bit of practice and a steady hand. And if your mouse is still moving around a lot, you might want to actually try just applying a little bit more pressure, or try less pressure. You can also try holding your mouse in what's called the claw grip, which is sort of putting your mouse and having sort of your hands off it. Some people find that easier to do. I find it easier to kind of have my whole hand on the mouse, gripping it firmly. If I click and drag this little black cross to the right, in this example, we'll see what it does. It tried to help. It's repeated the pattern 2 3 2 3 2 3. I was expecting to actually do to continue the numbering. If I actually delete these and put in 1 and then 2, if I do that same thing, so I'm going to highlight them, grab them by that little black cross and drag them across. This time it's kind of worked it out. It's kind of auto filled in some things for me. So Excel will try and help you. If it knows what you're trying to do, it'll try and aid you in doing that. So the little black cross is also known as the fill handle. So it's used for filling in things. The next one is the 4 arrows mouse cursor. So if I click on this cell once, so this cell is now selected. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more too. If I put my cursor somewhere on the border of this cell, but not in the corner, my cursor will change from the white cross to a 4-headed arrow. This is another one that's a little bit fiddly because you've got to get sort of right on the line. While the arrow has the 4 heads, if I hold down left mouse click, I can move the cell to somewhere else. So I hold down left click and I'll put it over here, for example. I've now moved it from one spot to another. I can also click and drag it and put it back again. If I have multiple cells selected, so I've used my white cross here to select multiple cells, put my cursor down, let it become the 4-headed arrow, I can move these ones down. Very useful for moving around data, in particular moving around formulas, because the formulas will be smart and know what's going on. The next two kind of go together. They expand the columns. So as we said before, expand the columns and also expand the rows. Our table is made up of columns and rows. If I put my cursor between, this is tricky, between the letters, not between the lines here, but up here at the top, between the letters A and B, for example, my cursor turns into a two-headed side-to-side arrow. When it's like that, if I hold down left click and drag, we can change the size of the column. So I can make this column really wide. If you've got some really wide text in there, it's a good way to make it more, make it bigger. Another trick is you can actually double left mouse click on that and it will resize it based on the largest thing in that column. So if I put the word Wednesday over here, you can see it looks like it spills over into the other cell, but that's just visual. There's nothing in this cell. You can tell because the formula bar there's nothing. If I click here, you can see in the formula bar it says Wednesday. If I double left click between the cells A and B up the top here, the heading cells, double left click, it will automatically adjust it to be the right size. Same thing goes for the row, except instead putting your cursor between the numbers, 1 and 2 for example, you can left mouse click and adjust the height of a row. So that's fairly self-explanatory. And once again, a double left click will automatically resize it. Next up is the insertion point. This one's a little bit trickier to explain. We've played around a little bit with the insertion point in Word as well. It's sort of showing us where we're going to be typing or where we are currently typing. This only appears when you are entering information. If the insertion point is flashing in the cell or the formula bar, then your cell is not highlighted and the most of the ribbon is unusable. To make it highlighted, you need to click out and then back into the cell. So let me show you that one. If I click into this cell, no insertion point yet, I can still click all these things up top. They're all still colored. I can still click these things. If I start typing Fred, I now have my insertion point, which is no longer a blinking line. It used to be a blinking line in the older versions. Now it's just a solid line. So the insertion point is where the next letter will be placed. As you can see, while we have this insertion point up, I can't click any of these things up here. None of these are clickable. We're sort of in edit mode, and you need to get out of edit mode before you can do certain things. So if I was to go out by pressing enter, for example, I can click back on it, and now I can do all these things that I couldn't before. So, I can make these things do different things up here. So the insertion point is just showing you that you're editing something. How are we doing for time? Pretty good. The last two items, or two things that your cursor could be doing, is the select columns and select rows. Before I showed you that if you put your cursor between the B and the C column, it turns into the two-headed arrow. If you put your cursor anywhere else on that column heading, it turns into a little down arrow kind of picture. If I left mouse click on one of these columns, it will select the entire column. So if I left click on the D column here with the down arrow, it selects that entire column. You can also actually left click and drag this one to select multiple columns. And the same goes for the rows as well. If I put my cursor on one of the actual numbers here and click it once, it selects the entire row, and I can also click and drag and select multiple rows. You might use this one, and we'll actually be using it later. We're actually going to highlight a column and do something to all of the numbers in that column. So being able to just click on that column once to do that saves you quite a bit of time. So the scenario was we're going to create a shopping list that will calculate. Students should first type the info displayed on the screen in class, as shown also below. It will be used in future slides. And then once we have it typed in, the question was what information is in cell B4. Well, let's actually move this out the way. And like that. So I'm going to delete what I have here already. I'm going to sort of also demonstrate what Colin was talking about. If I hold down left click while I have the white cross there, drag like that, the first cell that was selected remains, it looks like unselected, but it's not actually. If I come down here and do it the reverse way, it shows that was the first one selected. If I do it this way, you'll still see if I press delete, I delete everything, even though that one looks like it's not selected. It's just some sort of weird visual way they have to show the difference for what you have selected.
Yeah, you wouldn't credit how many times I went back over to try and work out why the other one wasn't on it.
Yeah, it's a confusing one. So I've just typed in cheese, bread, butter and milk, and then I've just used my arrow keys. My hands are still on the keyboard. And not 9, 6, 2, 3 and 1. And I've actually just used the number pad there, because the number pad has an enter key on it, so I can press the number and then press the enter key there. So once again, for data entry, you might need to do a lot of that, so having the number pad there is very handy. There is no equals in the number pad. That's a very good question. The equals is only in one spot on the keyboard, and it's along the row of numbers along the second to top row of your keyboard. It goes 7, 8, 9, 0, then you have the minus, then you have equals. It also has plus on there.
Yeah.
Next to your backspace key. Okay, so the question was, what information is in cell B4? Who can answer me that?
1.
Correct. Quite often people will say milk because they look at the row 4 and they look at the first entry, but you have to remember that we're doing a column and a row, so the cell is B1. And the answer is 1. Let's see. The 4 basic operators, as mentioned before, these are what we can use to do our simple formulas. You can use other ones, but these are the main ones that you would probably use. It's important to note that with computers, they do it a bit different to what we would expect as humans sort of writing things out. The division one's fairly straightforward. There's a /. You will find that one on the corner of the number pad, as well as the asterisk for multiplication. When we normally do math, we write like 2x3 equals 6. Pardon me. But if you say x to a computer, it can only sort of recognize it as a letter x. So for a computer, we use the asterisk key. You can also get the asterisk by holding down the shift key and pressing the number 8 on your numbers along the top of the keyboard, the second to the top row. Holding down shift and the 8 there will also give you the asterisk, or you can do it from your number pad. I'd like to point out the other ways of doing it, because some keyboards don't actually have the number pad, so you might not have those options over there. So it's good to note the other places where you can find them. For example, the subtract key is actually between the 0 and the equals key on your keyboard. So if you look up there on the second to top row of your keyboard, between 0 and plus, there's a key that has 2 different slashes on it. Holding down shift will actually give you an underscore, so sort of a lower version of the minus symbol. And then finally, the addition key is a little plus sign, and that can be found by holding down shift and pressing the same key that equals is on, or on the number pad. So that it starts off sounding simple, but then there's multiple different ways to get the actual symbols that you use. The / I didn't mention actually is on the same key as the question mark. So when we get into a bit more of Excel, you start having to do a bit of keyboard kung fu, and you have to press shift for some keys and not be pressing shift for other keys. So it takes a little bit of concentration and a little bit of practice. Now, coming back to our terminology from before, a few of the ones we sort of talked about but didn't really explain are formula, a mathematical formula used to calculate a result based on data from one or more other cells. Often they consist of some combination of the standard mathematical operators, plus, minus, multiplication and division. There's an example there. But may also include functions, see below. When you type a formula into a cell, that cell will generally display the result obtained by the formula rather than the formula itself. We'll have a look at how that looks in just a moment. There should be actually a line here that says, in cell B5, enter that formula in. So if I grab this over here, so in cell B5, column B, row 5, where the two things meet is cell B5. We can also see in the corner there, it's B5. I'm going to type equals, and I'm going to do capital letters, but you find you don't have to use capitals. You could turn caps lock on. Lowercase works fine too. This time I'm going to use capitals. Next time I'll use lowercase to show the difference. B2 plus B3 plus B4. And then I'm going to press enter up to finish my formula. So the answer is 12. I'm going to click back in there with my mouse. And we can also do some basic math just to double check our answer. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That adds up. It is good to have a little bit of maths. Excel's very good at doing math for you. But if you enter in the wrong things, then Excel's still going to do its thing correctly. But you need to look and go, hang on, that's supposed to be, you know, I've missed a 0 somewhere or something, which can be quite bad. With this cell selected, so I've clicked back into B5, you can see up in the formula bar here, the actual formula that it's taking to get that answer. So the cell itself will show the answer. The formula bar will show the formula that you used to get there. You can also click in there if you want to make some adjustments to it. And also it actually highlights each cell based on the color. Well, it shows you color for each cell. So you can see, I use this all the time. If I have a wrong cell being selected, you'll know because it'll be colored somewhere else. So if I was actually changed that B2 to a C2, you'll see it actually says, well, this cell over here. If I've done a typo, I'll be able to visually see it on the screen, as well as my answer won't be correct. So, you know, 10's my answer there, and if you add them up, you'll know that's not correct. I changed that back to, whoops, what did I change it to then? B2. And that time, it was lowercase, because my caps lock still. Equals tells Excel that you're going to do some math. Because if I type just, you know, a number here, and it sees it as a number, if I say, hang on a sec, actually equals, we're going to actually do something with that number, 5 plus 3, it actually gives us the answer, 8. So equals tells Excel, hang on, we're going to do some math. You need to do something with the next thing that we're doing, other than me just entering in words and numbers. We always need to start with an equal sign. Okay, so that was formulas. Let's move on to a function. A function is a pre-written formula that performs common and not so common calculations, such as summation and averaging. You can combine many functions and operators into a single formula to obtain more complex results. We're going to do a nice easy one. We're actually going to delete what's in cell B5 and type in something new. So I'm going to click in B5, I'm already there, and I'm going to press the delete key on my keyboard. It clears out what was in there. A bit of a graphical glitch there. And I'm going to do equals. So equals first tells Excel we're going to do some math.
Yep.
And I'm going to type in the word sum, S-U-M. S for Sierra, U for umbrella, M for Mike. Now we're going to use something called a range now, which we're going to explain in a moment. So we're going to do it first, and then we're going to explain it. This is where the keyboard kung fu comes in. I'm going to hold down the shift key and press the number 9, which gives me an open bracket.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a bracket that's kind of, is that my camera facing the right way? And then I'm going to type in B1 colon, so once again hold down the shift and press the key next to L, B4. And then to finish it off we need to close the bracket, so that's shift and 0. So that's why I call that keyboard kung fu. So it has to be a colon, so holding down the shift and pressing the button next to L will give you the colon. It's 2 dots. It's not the dot and the comma.
Yep. And then what did you want?
So after
B4.
after the colon is B4. And then we need to close the bracket again by holding down shift and pressing 0.
Sorry, press 0.
Yeah, so on the numbers along the top of your keyboard, not the F keys, but the numbers underneath that, holding down shift and pressing 0 will give you a closed round bracket.
I just heard the 0 bit and I thought, oh, that's an interesting way of getting the answer.
No. When you finish typing it in, we're just going to press enter. And we still get the same answer. So not very exciting, but we've come in and got the answer from doing something different here. So if you move back into cell B5, you can see in your address bar at the top, equals sum B1 to B4, or brackets B1 colon B4 close brackets. I usually say B1 to B4, 2 as in from one place to another.
Yeah.
So let's actually...
I suppose that's the easier way to do it if you've got to add them all up, rather than going B1, B2, B3, B4.
Exactly. And the question I usually ask, and I usually write this on the whiteboard, I usually do a lot of whiteboard work in this class, is if we had 10 items in our list, I'm actually going to do a little trick here. B1 plus B2 plus B3 plus B4. That was our first formula that we used, right? We then updated it to this. I'm doing a little trick where it actually doesn't calculate. Sum B1 to...
You've done your brackets.
I have. That was a test, you passed. B1 to B4. Okay, so now if I had 10 items on my list here, if they went down to here, what would I need to do to this first formula to make it work?
Add all of them.
Yep, so I'd need
Plus
B5.
B5, B6, plus B7, plus B8.
I see what that was there. Okay, and the final piece of terminology is range, which we've just used. The range is used to select a group of cells, must always be inside of brackets, must always have a colon. In our example for this function, our range is B1 colon B4, and that's inside of the brackets. So you could read it from left to right, open bracket, B1 colon B4 close bracket. So now we have an activity to use the other operators. We're going to add numbers to represent the quantity of each item that we are buying and use the multiplication operator to calculate the total cost. So first of all, add the numbers that you see in column C, and then in cell D1 and only in D1, add a formula with the multiplication operator. So the formula is going to be equals B1 times C1. First of all, add the numbers we see in column C. So 1, 3, 1, and 6. And I'm just pressing enter after each of those. We've lost our sum here. Then over here, we're going to put in equals. Remember, we always have to put equals first in Excel to tell it that we're going to do some math. B1 times C1. Once again, you can see that it highlights first one in blue and then the next one in red, so you can see them visually which ones it's talking about, and press enter. As we've experimented with before, and when we looked at the different things that your cursor tells you, if you have your cursor down the very bottom right hand corner of this cell, we get the little black cross. Holding down this will allow us to auto fill down that same formula into the other boxes. And you can check 2 times 3 is 6, 1 times 3 is 3, 1 times 6 is 6, and that is all correct. As we are now buying multiple items instead of just one, we need to add a formula to the cell D5. What should we add there? Also, we need to delete what's in B5 as we don't need it anymore. The answer is also right there on the page. So in here we need to go equals SUM for sum, open bracket, and we want the first one here, which would be D1 colon, remember that's shift and the button next to L, and D, same column, 4, and close bracket again. Get 21. As it mentions, we don't need this number anymore, so we can just delete that. The instructions then go through 2 different ways that we can use to add a row or a column. There's 2 different options. We're going to use the first one to create a row and the second one to actually create a column. So right mouse click on any cell in row 1, select insert, and then tick entire row and press OK. So as long as I'm in somewhere in the first row, I can right click anywhere and I'll get options. One of those options is insert, and insert we can select entire row. A few other options there. You just want this one, and then we're going to click OK. There we go. The other way, and this works for a column or a row, I'm going to do it for a column. I'm going to right mouse click on the column heading and select insert. This time it doesn't ask what you want. Because you've selected a column before you started, it knows that you must mean that you want to add another column. I can do the same thing for adding another row. If I right mouse click here and select insert, once again it won't ask me, it'll just add one in. I don't actually want that one, so I'm going to use the undo button up here. You could also use Control and Z on the keyboard to also undo something. As it mentions here, the same can be used to add columns. Now let's add our titles. Note that we can use our skills from Microsoft Word to make these look better. So we have item, price, quantity, and total. So up here I can just click in here and type the word item, I'm going to press tab to move across, price, across. I'm going to do QTY actually for quantity, and then total. Now what do I mean by you can use your skills in Microsoft Word? Well, if I highlight these 4 columns, we have the options here that are the same as you would find in Microsoft Word. Under the Home tab in the font command group, we can do things like make them bold. Over here in alignment, we can make them centered. Now our information looks a bit nicer. Something that I missed in the documentation, but we covered in class, was that we can also add labels to our numbers so that they actually have more meaning. I can put my my cursor here, left mouse click and drag down. That'll highlight that entire section of numbers. I've now let go of left mouse click. I can come over here, and if I first hold down the control key and then hold down left mouse click, I can select 2 different lots of numbers. This one takes a bit of practice, so I'm going to show that again. I'm going to click somewhere else to deselect. Click in here and drag down. Let go of mouse click. Hold down the control key. Click and drag again. And now both are highlighted. If I right mouse click anywhere inside one of these selected areas, it must be inside. If you right mouse click outside, it will actually unselect it. Now I need to go and select those again. So right mouse click inside one of these selected areas. We get the options for this. And we go down to the 4th last option, which is Format Cells. In here, we're going to go to Currency. We're going to remove the decimal places. We don't need it for this example. And then click OK. We now have some little dollar signs in front of our numbers, but if we click in one of these cells, we can see in the formula bar that the dollar sign hasn't actually been typed in there. It's just a label that sits in front of the number. If we skip over the Battleship activity, we might get a chance to do that another day. Next activity is to create a simple budget over on page 14 of the handout. Start by copying the simple budget as per below. We will need to work out what formulas and functions we need to calculate the various items in the budget. Note that you can resize a column by placing your cursor on the line between the letters of each column. Once again, we completed this back when we were looking at the mouse cursor in Excel. So take a moment now, pause the video if you need to, and write down the things that you see here in your Excel document, remembering that you can put your cursor between the columns to drag them to make them bigger. Please note that I've also left the first row blank and that things should line up. So when you're finished, you should see total outgoings in A16, remaining in A18, and you should have some blank boxes there and there. Okay, so for this activity, we're going to work out our total outgoings, how much we are spending or putting away for each and the remaining, how much we have left after putting money away for everything. To do this, we can type the function in cell B16 equals sum B5 to B15. You can type that in here. I'm going to show you a little shortcut way to do it. Get that out of the way. Okay, I'm in cell B16. If you're in B16, you should be next to total outgoing. And I'm just going to use the auto sum button that we looked at before. If I click on auto sum, it knows not to go beyond the word amount. It realizes that it wants to look above it, but it won't go past any sort of headings that might be there. So it's ignored the other things up here. So I can just press enter. And that number is correct. Alternatively, I can press delete there, and I can type in my formula myself. Equals sum, open bracket, B5 to B15. Gives us the same result. Now you might be asking yourself, why have you left some 3 blank lines there? The idea of this would be to future-proof your document so that you could add extra things in that might come up. So let's say there was a kid's party or something and you needed to allocate money for that. You could add that in and it would still be part of the calculation. To work out the remaining, we're going to take our income and then subtract our outgoings. And once again, we could type in the numbers, which would be B2 minus B16. But another way to select your cells is to actually click in them. I can actually click in there after I've typed my equals, then press the minus sign, and then click on the other one. B2 minus B16 and press enter. Minus 56, that's not good. It is correct though, it has done the correct calculation. This was done on purpose to illustrate how negative numbers work. I'm actually going to delete that one and type it in manually, just to show you the difference. B2 minus B16, press enter, gives us the same result. And if I click in here, we can see it in the formula bar as well. Finally, we're going to use the same technique to change the format of numbers to be currency. Now this time we can actually click the column heading here. So I can just click on the B, select the whole column. I can right mouse click and go down to format cells. Go to currency. Once again, we're going to set it to 0 decimal places. And this time I'm going to change how negative numbers are displayed. I personally like this one here, where it's red and it has the minus sign. That way any negative numbers will really show up. I'm going to click OK. Scroll down to the bottom here, and there we go. That stands out quite nicely. One of the great things about Excel is how it sort of dynamically will update things. So this formula here, this function here, is looking at all of the numbers in here, and this one is also using that one as well as the number at the top. So if you keep an eye on this box here and this one here, as I change our savings, let's say, well, instead of putting away 500, let's put away 300. I'm just going to type over it, 300, and press enter, and total outgoings decreased and our remaining increased, and it is no longer a negative number, so it's now back in black. Finally for today, we're going to look at charts. Charts are a great way to visually represent the data from your Excel spreadsheet, and I've always found that humans find it much easier to see things if it's a nice visual representation rather than a whole list of numbers. So to do so, we're going to select the cells to include in the chart. We're going to click the Insert toolbar. We're going to click on Recommended Charts button and then choose the first recommended chart. Please note that if you're using an older version of Excel, you might not see the Recommended Charts button, in which case you would just need to click on the bar chart. The data that I want to include in my chart is from the word rent down to the number 300. I don't actually need the blank ones here. If I had anything else in there, I would include them. Otherwise, we're going to get some blank data in our chart, which we don't need. It is important to note that when you select a range of cells like this, the first one is always left sort of unhighlighted. This throws most people off. Just keep in mind that the green line is actually going around the whole thing, and this is for some reason to show you which was the first cell you selected. So if I select somewhere else, then highlight it starting from the bottom here, the 300 will be selected or unselected instead. Now, as the instruction said, I'm going up to the Insert tab, across to Recommended Charts. Recommended Charts will have a look at your data and then say a couple of different options you can choose. We're going to use the first one, which is the clustered column, and then click OK. It looks nice. It looks a bit big though. I'm going to grab it by the corner, which, as you might remember, is the recommended way to resize something, but there's something different in Excel. If I actually grab the corner, I get sort of a free way to arrange this. I don't actually want it to be like that. I'm going to do Control Z. I'm actually going to grab it by the corner and hold down Shift, which is a bit of a tricky one, but it allows you to force it to be the proper size, the proper ratio. There we go. And just to finish up today, on page 18, we go over the 3 buttons that appear when a chart is selected. So if I click somewhere else, and then back onto the chart, you'll see these 3 buttons that appear. We have the plus button, the brush, and the funnel. The plus button allows you to change the elements of the chart. Let's say, for example, we don't actually need a chart title on this one. I'm going to untick chart title. You can see there at the top, as I turn it on and off, what happens there. It appears and disappears. You could, if you wanted to, actually, enter something in here like get into a month or something else. For our example, I'm actually just going to turn it off. I'm also going to turn on data labels. When you turn on data labels, each one of these bars in the bar chart gets the number that actually is represented there above it. It's a nice way to show how much is in each one of those, because if you're looking at this one, it's not on right on the line. As for the 80 as well, it can be a bit hard to work out exactly what it's talking about. These two look very close, but you can see they're different because of the numbers. Up next is the paintbrush, which allows you to change the style and color of your chart. If you are generating a chart that you need to print, I recommend not doing one like this, because you'll eat up all the ink from your printer. Something like that might be nice. Over here on the other side we have color. This one can be a little bit confusing because you don't actually get the color that you click on. If I click on the brown color here, you don't actually get that one. These ones are mostly used for pie charts, where you can have a different color for each slice of the pie. If you had this one for one of the pie charts, you'd have a different shade for each slice. When we have this sort of mode, we're only really getting the first one. This particular style has some sort of gradient, but it's not actually representative of the colors here. You can see I'm not getting each of those different colors, only the first one. Finally, we have the funnel. Over here we can change how the information is presented. This is not really useful for our small amount of data we have here. If you wanted to though, you could, for example, not show something on your thing. Let's say you didn't want that vet bill to actually be shown there. If you untick that one and then click apply, this one you have to actually click apply for it to happen. The vet bill is removed from your chart, but it hasn't removed it from over here. I'm going to put it back in though. Leave that one in and apply. It's also good to note before, as we change some numbers around here, if I change some numbers on my data here, let's say we put entertainment down to 50, as I press enter, watch what happens to the entertainment bar over here. I'm going to press it. It dynamically or automatically, without having to do anything else, changes it over here too. Maybe you need to spend a bit more money on food. Let's do 350, press enter, and see that one goes up.